Yo, Rad, can you shout out my mom in your next video? She loves your quirky side. Me, he, ha, 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 he. Shout out his mom. The Windows 7 era was the peak of the gaming industry, and I'm not talking about some kind of nostalgia here. No. Look at these games that you're seeing right now on the screen. You think they came out in the same year? Bullshit. Same month. And there were a lot of months like that during the Windows 7 generation. We got the best games that were genuinely revolutionary and technologically groundbreaking thanks to Windows. That was the era when even trash tier studios knew how to make good games. Oh yeah, and it was the one and only generation where PC gaming truly beat the damn consoles. But at some point, it all ended. Consoles started catching up to PCs in terms of raw power, PC exclusives disappeared somewhere along the way, and some viewers today are straight up confused what the hell a PC exclusive even is. Now back in the Windows 7 days, PC gaming was the thing driving the whole industry forward. So why didn't that story continue? Who is to blame for the decline of the PC platform, and why is it only going to get worse from here? That entire era stood on one single number that nobody could break past. The PS3 and Xbox 360 both had 512 megabytes of memory for everything. The game, its graphics, and the console's own operating system. That number didn't change for literally 8 years, and for developers, that was a brutal constraint. When a game turned out to be, more demanding, there was nowhere to grab more memory from, which is exactly why some of that generation's ideas only got realized later on new hardware. But back then, every game got squeezed to fit consoles. Even GTA 5, which, let's be honest, didn't run great on that 512 megabytes, but at least it did run. And there were way more releases than there are now. Almost every game tried to technically stand out from the rest. Like, we kept getting more graphics and new tech, literally, just constantly. All that flood of PC games landed on Windows 7. Before it, there was Vista, which was complete garbage, and people despised it so much that they stayed on old XP. Windows 7, though, took a different path and finally made PC a platform equal to consoles. And then, it went even further. First of all, Windows 7 did something consoles had been doing for literally ages. It stopped being a resource hog. A console system barely touched the hardware itself, leaving almost everything to the game, and Windows 7 finally started behaving the same way. For a developer, that just meant a PC gave them more free hardware headroom to work with than a console did. Every year, faster CPUs and faster GPUs showed up, and Windows let you actually use that extra power without changing the development model itself. The exact same game had to run on a console from 2005, but on a good PC, it could get higher resolutions, more detail, and effects the console simply could not physically handle anymore. Another advantage of that era was DirectX 11, and it was built so that the hardest work wasn't on the developer's plate. There's always a translator standing between the game and the graphics card, converting commands into that specific hardware's language, and in DirectX 11, that translator was a GPU driver. Basically, the driver took the game's general commands and handled the precise, complicated part itself. It figured out how to lay out video memory and prepared small programs tailored to each specific card model, shaders that draw the surfaces. The developer didn't need to know the guts of every single graphics card because, well, the driver covered all of those differences. The game ran smoothly out of the gate, and even a technically weaker studio couldn't screw it up too badly because, well, Nvidia or AMD had their back. Nvidia and AMD had their back. Wow, what a time. The best showcase of that era is Battlefield 3. DICE built their Frostbite 2 engine to fit on old consoles, and then on PC, they took the limits off. The computer version, running on DirectX 11, pulled off more complex lighting, streamed in resources on the fly, and rendered massive battle spaces that consoles simply couldn't reach. Later on newer versions of Windows, we got DirectX 12, which flipped everything the other way. Now, the game talks to the graphics card directly, and that same precise work, the memory management, the shader prep, has to be done by the studio itself. And let's be honest, skilled developers, especially now with all these DEI programs, are getting rarer by the day. So today, shaders often get compiled right in the middle of gameplay. And that's when you hit those stutters or the little freezes when you walk into a new area, basically the ones the driver on Windows 7 used to hide from you completely. To this day, the simplest fix for that stutter is still switching the game from DirectX 12 back to 11. But why would Microsoft even bother moving to DirectX 12 in the first place? That becomes clear once you understand who actually benefited from it. So tell me, who won when the industry switched to DirectX 12? Definitely not you. and AMD stopped bothering with the extra work of optimizing games for you. And Microsoft got a shiny new DirectX that grew out of their Xbox and became the reason a huge chunk of the audience finally got dragged off Windows 7, since it only runs on Windows 10. This technology, keep in mind, was never built with the person sitting in front of the game in mind first. Now, to really feel what we lost here, remember what the era meant for the games themselves. The same game used to live in two worlds at once. On a 2005 console, it was locked into rigid constraints, but on PC, those same constraints got just completely ripped off. And it wasn't even about one single technology. It was about an entire tier of quality the console just simply could not reach. Take, let's say anti-aliasing, for example. On consoles, the edges of objects almost always stayed jagged staircases because good anti-aliasing ate up memory that just was not there. It didn't exist. On PC, you'd go into the settings, crank MSAA to, 4x or 8x, and those jagged stairs just disappeared. Smooth staircases. Same story with textures. I mean, on console, the road under your feet turned to mush after just a few meters, while on PC, an isotropic filtering kept it sharp all the way to the horizon. Most people didn't even know these technologies existed. They just assumed PC games looked better than console ones because PCs were cheaper or whatever. But Windows had things that simply didn't exist on console at all. Metro 2033 was one of the first games to seriously use tessellation, DirectX 11's ability to actually build out real geometry on a surface in real time. For example, on console, a brick wall stayed a flat image with painted on shadows. On PC, thanks to DirectX, that same wall gained real volume, with like bumps, cracks, chips that light actually hit correctly. 4A games didn't have to do that. The console version would have just sold fine either way, but they did it anyway. Mafia 2 went even further and offloaded an entire layer of the game onto the GPU. Through PhysX, it calculated physics directly on the graphics card. A jacket had actual weight and flapped in the wind, glass shattered into different pieces every single time, and dust and debris lived in real time instead of, playing back a pre-baked animation. Consoles couldn't do any of that. There just wasn't anything there to crunch the numbers. Only owners of powerful PCs of the time ever saw that layer of the game, and the studio poured effort into it anyway. But the strongest proof here is the games that didn't exist on console at all. Total War never came to consoles because as Creative Assembly themselves started outright, neither the Xbox nor the PS3 could handle thousands of individual soldiers on screen, each with their own behavior. Now, that came down to raw CPU power, which the consoles simply didn't have. Same story with the Arma series. Its whole scale relied on being able to simultaneously calculate huge numbers of active units and complex AI behavior across a massive map. That model was just too heavy for consoles of that era, so Arma stayed a PC series for years. Oh, another PC exclusive, Stalker, used that freedom in a different way. It ran a system called A-Life, where NPCs and mutants had their own lives outside the player's direct line of sight. They could move between locations, get into fights, die even, and change the state of the world on their own. For 2007, guys, that was an incredibly ambitious system, and it simply could not run on consoles. Crysis showed off yet another level of what PC allowed back then. In 2007, again, Crytek didn't even try to squeeze the first game onto Xbox 360 or the PS3. It also launched exclusively on PC, running CryEngine 2 with an insane amount of physics, complex lighting, dense vegetation, huge open spaces, and destruction that was brutally demanding even for good PCs of that time. And that's actually exactly where the "can it run Crysis" meme came from. The game basically became the benchmark for new hardware because even expensive rigs couldn't always hold max settings steady. Now, only 4 years later did Crysis get ported to Xbox 360 and PS3. By that point though, Crytek had already moved on to CryEngine 3 and had spent literally years just trying to get the whole category of tech to run properly on consoles at all. Now, back then, PC could actually shape a game's design, and being a PC exclusive was, just normal. Exclusives existed back then to give developers the chance to build what they actually envisioned, something a console physically couldn't reproduce. If the vision needed, more CPU or more memory or a more complex simulation, a studio could leave consoles behind entirely and still ship a massive successful project. Sure, we do still have plenty of PC exclusives today, don't get me wrong, but most of them are indie projects made by devs who can't be bothered to even, port to consoles. Yeah, we technically get higher resolutions and slightly more FPS on PC now, but at what cost? I mean, the cost of $1,000 and barely noticeable improvements. That's the cost. Looking at where things are now versus how they used to be, I think you can see PC's whole status as a platform disappearing. The idea that a game could outgrow its console version or simply not fit on console at all. So here's the question. Why did Microsoft, the company that built this perfect gaming platform with its own hands, turn around and destroy it? Back in 2007, Microsoft already tried to take PC gaming under its own wing. It was called Games for Windows Live, and the whole idea was to port the Xbox model onto PC. A separate account, forcing you to log in just to launch a game and save your progress, all tied to their systems. It worked so badly that games with that lock-in got patched for years afterward just to rip it back out. In 2014, the company finally shut the project down, and honestly, 7 years feels like way too long to figure out that platform was garbage. Let's be real here. But Microsoft, for some reason, never understood why gamers didn't want yet another extra service getting in the way of them just playing games. Steam took everything. Instead of separate logins for every single game, Steam just handed you the entire library in one place. By the mid-2010s, PC gaming basically was Steam, and Microsoft had no place in that business. Now, given the personal history between Gabe Newell and Microsoft, it's not exactly shocking that Microsoft decided to stop pouring money into a business run by the same guy who once turned their own system into a gaming platform in the first place. And having lost that fight, Microsoft simply stopped caring about gamers. Windows 8 launched with a garbage design, like everyone was supposed to switch to tablets any second now. Most users just honestly stayed on Windows 7. Kind of like what's going on with the Windows 10 and 11. Do you guys like Windows 11? Because personally, I'm still on Windows 10. Windows 10 brought back a normal desktop, but the system itself started working differently under the hood. Microsoft shifted to a Windows as a service model, basically where big changes now rolled out through regular updates after installation. Now, along with those updates, Windows could swap out drivers, add system components, and run more background services. At the same time, Microsoft tried once again to break into game sales through its own store. The first PC release in that format came loaded with technical restrictions. Players had a much harder time working with game files, mods, and third-party tools, and some features PC gamers took for granted weren't even supported at first. Now, gradually, Microsoft shifted its approach. The company started pulling Windows and Xbox closer together through shared accounts and crossplay. For developers, that meant one game could now launch simultaneously across a single ecosystem spanning both console and PC. And with that, the gap between platform versions of the same game also changed. In the Windows 7 generation, the PC version could have technology the console version physically could not support at all. Today, the difference usually comes down to resolution and frame rate, technologies that mostly exist so you keep spending more money on new graphics cards. The core world geometry, physics, and game systems are usually designed with consoles in mind from the very start. DirectX 12 also changed how work gets split between the driver and the game itself. It gives developers lower level access to the GPU and lets them control memory and command cues more precisely. But along with that, most of the responsibility for using those resources correctly shifted onto, you guessed it, the developer. This shows up especially clearly with shaders, or more specifically with shader loading. Meanwhile, the hardware itself got dramatically more powerful. Windows 7 existed during a period when weak consoles set a very low baseline, while powerful PCs gave developers a massive surplus on top. Studios first had to make a game work on old hardware, and only then could they use PC to layer on technologies that simply didn't fit anywhere else. And that's exactly why we got to have both. Well-optimized games, thanks to consoles holding everything back, and fast-moving graphics and technology, thanks to PC pushing everything forward. And now this is my favorite line on this channel.